let's talk about Conor McGregor. There's been many controversies around, the former UFC star. And, some would argue still a star. But do you ever look at the things that he's done and go, what the fuck is he thinking? And when you look at it through the eyes of someone who's been addicted to alcohol and drugs and things like that, it makes a bit more sense. And I'm not saying that he is or isn't. I'm just saying that when I look at it from an outsider's perspective, and I don't live his life and I don't claim to know anything about his life, but as someone that used to do stupid shit when I was drinking, it makes sense. Because when you drink it, you think, oh yeah, that's a good idea, and then you go with it. And that's not to say that that's where he's coming from. I just thought, well, I was thinking, well, what can I talk about? How can I help people using the lessons that are out there? One of the lessons is really, he's a man, seemingly got the world at his feet, seemingly got financially so much money that money will never be a problem for him or anyone in his family ever again. Yet he still struggles with the one thing that we, all have in common as men. Maybe the drink. That's why we're talking about it, because you see, he's partying like it's 12 or whatever it is, 1999, and he's living the good life. But at the same time, all these things, all these problems that he's creating in his life, yeah, he's got the money to get himself out of these problems, but when you think about it, wouldn't life be a whole lot fucking easier for him if he didn't dig himself into all these stupid holes from doing poor choices? And what he does in his personal life is what he does in his personal life. So I'm not making a judgment about that, because his relationships and things like that, that's his business. But outwardly, he's creating problems for himself that don't need to be made. Because if you think that the choices that he's making, it's really scary. If you think that the choices that he's making aren't being made by, irrational, alcohol and drug choices, the guy clearly has some issues. And we've all got issues, and that's no judgment. It's just that you think, well, if you look at it from a perspective of, well, okay, well, he's just pissed and doing stupid shit over and over and over again, you would say a sane man, a man that's got enough money to fix the problem, to fix any problem that could ever arise, would do something about it. But I guess you have to recognise that there's a problem. You have to recognise that the choices that you're making are causing problems. And that's probably what's happening for him, is that he's got so much money, so much clout, so much power, and everyone says yes to him, that he's got no ability to recognise that, hey, he's making poor choices. There's no one going to tell him that he's making poor choices, because he owns everybody. And you think, well, that's a good thing and a bad thing. But if nobody's out there going, oh, you're doing something really stupid, and the only way I can see that this ends is with a health scare, a legal scare, which he's had plenty of already. And these things, the stakes get higher and higher. He may or may not lose his family. He may or may not lose his health. He may or may not lose it, all these things. But he's got money. But does he have peace of mind? You think You've got everything in the world. And yet, you have to get pissed. And yet you have to sniffy. It just doesn't compute. But then at the same time it does, because it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how successful you are as a man. If you're not comfortable in your own skin, if you're not comfortable with who you are, there's always going to be a part of you that needs to escape. There's always going to be a part of you that goes, oh, well, fuck, this is, too hard. I've got to do something else. And it's only when you learn to sit with yourself, it's only when you learn to be comfortable in your skin, that the need to escape, the need to get high, the need to run away dissipates. And that's really one of the difficult skills that you'll face when you first stop drinking and when you first get sober, is that ability to sit with yourself in the quiet times and be okay with that. I mean, even now I still sometimes think, fuck, I feel a bit lonely, but then I'm like, feel a bit off. But then I have to do something. I have to keep my mind busy. I have to refocus. And there's always another way, rather than, getting pissed or taking drugs. But it's only when you've lived that way for a long time that it doesn't necessarily become your first option. And, like, for Conor McGregor, I just don't know. I don't know, like, what he's thinking. I'd like to say that, that he can turn this around, but you see so many famous sports people, you see so many famous people that seemingly have the world at their feet, but the one thing that they can't conquer is the thing between their ears. And they might be successful on the sports field or the arena. They might be, they might be successful financially, but is that success if you can't even control a bottle? You can't even control the substance over it, that it has power over you. There's no success in that. And it's not to say that, I'm a master of the universe. I've got everything sorted, because the truth is nobody has everything sorted. It's about learning to go through life, learning to manage life, learning to be in life whilst life goes on around you, and not having to run and hide when there's a problem, not having to create problems. There used to be a time when, I used to just disappear into the bottle for days and days. But now I couldn't imagine that would be an option. Sometimes I think, it would be a nice escape. But at what cost? And that's where you have to talk about, making those choices, recognizing that there's a price to be paid. Sobriety has a price of freedom, but it also has a price of sitting with yourself. Just like when you drink, has a price, a really big price. And the problem when you're drinking and you're doing things is you don't recognize you're paying the price until it's too late. I know for myself, I had a stroke and had health challenges, and my life became a nightmare. But it didn't just happen. It didn't just go, oh well, fucking it's all up shit. It's a process, because you've got to imagine that where Conor McGregor is now, he didn't start off thinking, oh, I'm going to go skyrocket and be a superstar and all that. Yeah, he talked about that, having the belief that would happen and stuff like that. But at the same time, he probably had the monkey on his back then. And then as he's grown and evolved and, become the champion of the world and the champion of, UFC and all those sort of things, and been successful. The monkey still sat there on his back, waiting for an opportunity to jump out and bite him on the ass. And every time that he does something stupid, every time, it can be traced back to him not being in control. Because somebody that was in control, somebody that would have the abilities to be what he is and to succeed like he has. So he does, what I'm going to say is, he does have those abilities. But obviously something is getting in the way of him living his legacy. Because now, he's just looking like a fucking clown. Over and over and over again. Where people are going to go, oh, well, he's a clown. Yeah, he's got lots of money and stuff like that. And he's probably like, he probably doesn't care what other people think of him. But you think about it, he worked into his career to become a legend, only to unravel and become the laughingstock. Getting his snork out and flopping it around for, sending it to random people on the internet. Those aren't sane choices. They're choices of somebody that's, under the influence of something that probably they wouldn't be under the influence of if they were drinking water and looking out the window. But that being said, just imagine another few more years of him making poor choices. And what will come of that? Where will that lead him? And how will that impact his legacy? He could have gone out as a hero, but he ended up, he got all the money in the world, but is all the money in the world worth shitting on everything that you've achieved up until there? And some would say yes. I don't know. But you think about it. He proved to everyone that he was a hero. He proved, whatever you think of him, he proved that he said he was going to do something when he was young. He did it. Created a legacy. And now he's single-handedly going around destroying it with really poor choices. And this is what we do. As men, we become successful. We might have a business. We might have a good career. But then each little time that we fuck up because of the drink, we make a mistake, we say something stupid, there's consequences to those things. Over and over and over again, the consequences build up to the point where they just keep spiraling out of control to the point where you end up with nothing. And that's not to say that he will. But it's a really big lesson to think, well, if someone's so successful can fuck up this monumentally over and over and over again, with all the resources that he has, he still manages to make a dick of himself. What about us with not as many resources? The choices that we're going to make are really have got bigger consequences because he can buy himself out of those consequences. He can pay people to get away from the problems. And that's part of the problem that will possibly be in the way of him recognising that there's a long-term problem. Because if everyone's nodding and on the payroll and outwardly he's successful financially, but inwardly clearly he's not successful if he needs to get away from himself. And I'm not gonna diagnose him or anything. I'm just gonna say that success isn't just money. Success isn't just winning a sport or in business. Success is sitting with yourself, being comfortable in your body, being able to go, okay, I made a mistake, recognizing that you make a mistake and trying to improve. And it's not about improving and being fucking perfect, because nobody's ever going to be perfect. I'm not perfect. I'm far from it. I make mistakes every fucking day. But we can learn from them. We can grow from them, and we can accept that we're not perfect, and we can try better. We can try harder and do something different. But if you're going to go every day, get pissed every day, do the same thing over and over and over again, that's not success. Success starts when you recognize drinking doesn't work. Drinking has a cost. You don't want to pay that cost anymore, and you don't drink anymore. What does that look like? Well, you've got to fucking stop drinking to find out. And that's how you can build a new life. That's how you can stop fucking, sending the random text messages to people that, whoopsie doopsies and, and things like that. And you can stop saying things that you don't mean, and you can stop doing things that you don't mean to do. It's just by stopping drinking. Because the moment that you stop drinking, you're in control of everything you say, do, and think. You're not being controlled by the bottle, because sometimes when we're drunk, we do really stupid shit. And if you don't want to do stupid shit that you don't know of, don't get drunk. And just remember that every stupid shit that you do has a consequences, even though it might not be today. Eventually these consequences build up, year after year. Your legacy will be destroyed. But just remember, no matter how far you've fallen, no matter how much you've fucked up, you can start again. You can rise again. And you can begin to build a new legacy. Because what other choice do you have? Really, what other choice? Because you're at the crossroads now. You recognise that you can either keep drinking and nothing will change for the better, because it will change for the worse, or you can start to improve your life by seeking some help and stopping drinking. Because ultimately that's the only way that your life's going to really improve. If drinking's a problem in your life, that's the one thing that you can change, you can control, that will have the biggest impact immediately into your life. I believe in you. Now it's time for you to believe in yourself and do something about your drinking. Go to kickthepiss.com and let's talk.